Today, we're going to learn how to become detectives of everyday life. Seriously, I'm going to give you a field guide to a really powerful approach called linguistic ethnography. Think of it as a brand new lens that's going to completely change how you see the world around you, from a business meeting to the local playground.
And it really all boils down to this one fascinating question. How do all the tiny, seemingly insignificant moments of our day, a little pause, a glance, the specific words someone chooses, how do those things build the massive social structures that govern our lives? Everything, and I mean everything, from how a classroom works to who has power in an office, it's all built from these tiny little details.
And guess what? We're going to find out how it works together. So for this, consider me your senior researcher. I'm here to walk you through your very first project, step by step, all the way from heading out into the field to presenting your findings. Okay, let's dive in.
So, what is this language detective work anyway? Let's break down exactly what we mean when we say linguistic ethnography.
Okay, so linguistic ethnography, or LE for short. You should think of it less as some rigid academic discipline and more like a powerful toolkit. It's an approach that basically combines the super detailed focus of a linguist with the immersive, boots-on-the-ground perspective of an ethnographer. And the whole goal? It's to see how language isn't just describing the world, it's actively building our social world moment by moment.
And this quote right here gets to the heart of what makes LE so powerful. It's all about connecting the micro, the tiny details of a single conversation, to the macro forces of culture, politics, and history. Here's another way to think about it. Ethnography helps us see the big, messy, complicated picture of social life, while linguistics gives us the hard, concrete evidence to back up what we're seeing. Of course, none of this came out of nowhere. We're standing on the shoulders of giants here. So to really get Lee, we've got to understand where it came from. Let's take a quick look at the intellectual history that made all this work possible. So, the story really kicks off in North America, back in the 60s and 70s. You had these absolute pioneers like Delheims and John Gumphers who basically said, hey, we have to study language in its rich, messy, cultural context, not in a sterile lab. Then you jump to the 80s, and thinkers like Irving Goffman and Frederick Erikson gave us the tools for this incredible microanalysis of interaction. All these powerful ideas then made their way over to the UK, where scholars like Ben Rampton helped formalize LE into what it is today, a whole community of researchers focused on real-world stuff.
And this, right here, this was the foundational shift in thinking. For a long time, the main focus in linguistics was on linguistic competence, the abstract, perfect, idealized rules of grammar. But Himes came along and proposed something different, communicative competence. He basically asked, what does a person actually need to know to use language appropriately and effectively in a real social group? And that one simple question, well, it blew the doors wide open for everything we do in linguistic ethnography.
All right, you've got the theory down. Now it's time to get your hands dirty. Let's start gearing up for your first trip out into the field. This is where the real detective work begins. When you're out there in the field, you have to think of yourself as a human recording device, and your job is to capture everything. And I mean everything. We're talking way beyond just the words people say. Notice the layout of the room. How far are people standing from each other? Who's looking at who? What are they doing with their hands? You even need to note the background sounds, the smells, and, this is crucial, your own emotional reactions. It's all data.
Your field notes are going to be your most critical asset, period. And it's a process, right? Step 1 is just jotting down quick, messy notes while things are happening. Then, step 2, as soon as you possibly can, you sit down and write up much more detailed, expanded notes. But step 3 is the secret sauce. You write reflexive memos. That's where you analyze your own role, your own presence, and your own biases.
Now, that brings up a really important question. Why is your reaction data? I mean, it sounds a little strange, right? Well, it's because in this kind of detective work, there is absolutely no such thing as a perfectly invisible observer. It's impossible. Your very presence in a room shapes the interaction. Your own background influences what you even notice in the first place. So being reflexive, turning that magnifying glass back on yourself to understand your own perspective, that isn't a flaw in the research. It's actually a crucial tool for a more rigorous and honest analysis. Okay, so you're back from the field. You've got notebooks full of observations, maybe hours of recordings. How in the world do you turn this mountain of raw data into some kind of meaningful insight? Let's talk analysis.
First up, we need to get our heads around a key concept, indexicality.
It sounds complicated, but I promise it's simpler than it seems. It just means that signs, like a certain word or an accent, or even the way someone's dressed, they point to something else. They index or signal things like social status or professional identity, or that you belong to a certain group. Our job as detectives is to figure out what's being pointed to and why.
And here's the thing. We can't just look at the words. That's where multimodality comes in. Meaning isn't just in the text of what someone says, it's made through this whole symphony of channels all working at once. The words are shaped by hand gestures, by eye gaze, by the objects on the table, by the very space people are in. We have to analyze all of it together to get the full picture. And this is where it all comes together in practice. A detailed transcript is what makes our analysis possible. Look at this example. We don't just write down what Sarah said. We capture how she said it. The fact that she leans forward, that half-second pause she takes, the way she puts extra emphasis on the word that. These are all absolutely crucial parts of how she's making meaning. This is how we make all that multimodal data visible on the page.
Now, you are not expected to manage this mountain of data by hand, okay? That would be a nightmare. Thankfully, there are some powerful digital tools to help us out. For your field notes and transcripts, software like Atlas T is a lifesaver. It lets you code your data, basically tagging key moments and ideas so you can easily find patterns. And for really large sets of text, a corpus tool like AntConc can analyze things like word frequency, which can reveal some really surprising patterns you'd never see with the naked eye.
Finally, one of the most important parts of analysis is something called a data session. This is where you bring a short clip of your data, audio or video, to a group of your peers. You all listen or watch it together, and everyone just shares what they see, what they hear, what they think is going on. It is an absolutely incredible way to spot things you missed, and just as importantly, to hold yourself accountable. It challenges your own assumptions and makes your final analysis so much stronger. So, what's the big payoff for all this incredibly detailed work? Let's walk through a case study to see how it all comes together. This, my friends, is where the magic happens, where one tiny, mundane moment can reveal a whole universe of hidden social forces. Our scene couldn't be simpler. It's almost boring. You've got a nursery nurse, she's sitting at a little table, and she's just writing a brief note about what a child is doing. I mean, it's a totally ordinary, everyday action, right? But with our LE toolkit, we can see it's so much more than that. Okay, look at how we can connect the micro to the macro here. The simple act of her writing that note, at the very same time, she is fulfilling an institutional demand for official records. The professional jargon she uses, that isn't just description, it's indexing her expertise, her professional identity. By documenting a developmental milestone, she's actually enacting national education policy right there at that tiny table. And by completing the task, she's building a paper trail that helps build a case for her own career progression. In that one tiny moment, all of these huge social, political, and institutional forces are present and active. That is the power of LE. So, after all of this, the fieldwork, the transcribing, the intense analysis, what have we really gained? Well, we've gained a completely new way of seeing the world. Ultimately, linguistic ethnography is like this beautiful dynamic dance. It's this constant back and forth between the superfine precision of linguistic analysis and the open, curious, deeply contextualized perspective of ethnography. And it's right there, in that dance, that we find our most powerful insights into how human social life actually works. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. As you go about the rest of your day-to-day, just listen. Listen carefully to the conversations happening around you. Ask yourself, what's going on beneath the surface? What hidden social forces, what histories, what big ideas are shaping the simple words that you hear? Because now you have the tools to be the detective.